Hi, this is John Hess. I'm the Executive Director of the California CEC organization. I want to welcome you to the webinar on supporting students in a post-pandemic classroom through social, emotional, and behavior supports. Our two presenters are from the Diagnostic Center North. Natalie is a bilingual school psychologist, has her master's in educational psychology with a focus on clinical and child psychology. She's worked in special ed for over a decade as an instructional assistant, as a school psychologist, and as an administrator. She also has expertise working with all age levels from preschool through transition. Her interests and passions include executive functioning, working with students with significant needs, and helping early career teachers and school psychologists develop their skills. Tara is a behavior analyst and educational specialist at the Diagnostic Center North. She also was a classroom teacher, specialized in working with students with extensive support needs. She has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction in special ed. Her areas of expertise are increasing classroom engagement, functional behavior assessments, accessible classroom behavior supports, and school mental health supports. Tara is a board-certified behavior analyst. She is a doctoral student in applied behavioral analysis, and her philosophy as an educator is that empowering a child can change the world. I'm going to turn this over to them in just a moment. A couple of quick things. We will follow up with the Survey Monkey. You'll get that after the webinar within the next few days. And then we do a drawing for a raffle. We have an upcoming webinar. The date has not been scheduled on teachers and seeing parent perspectives. So our presenter is a special ed teacher who has a child with a disability. So she sees special ed on both sides. And we are planning an in-person state conference in October in San Diego, and we'll be developing that information in the next couple of months. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Natalie and Tara.
Perfect. Thank you, John, so much. We are so happy to be here today. We're excited to talk with you for the next hour and a little bit here about how to support students in the classroom. And I think we want to revise the statement around post-pandemic, acknowledging that we are still kind of in that whole pandemic world, and definitely all of the supports and strategies and ideas that we have today will really continue to help students and feeling more safe and supported and kind of grounded as the world is still a little bit of a crazy place right now. So we're very happy to be here. Natalie and I do a lot of training on these topics, and this is kind of a nice consolidated little picture of some strategies that we're hoping can be really usable and applicable to you all right off the bat. We don't love that we can't see your all faces. We know we're in a panel kind of presentation today, but please don't hesitate to ask questions or make comments in the chat. We're more than willing and welcome and want to answer questions that are applicable to you and what the situation that you're in your daily life in the classroom. So please engage with us in that way. Really quickly, our schedule today, we're going to talk first about how do we create safety in the classroom in terms of emotional and physical safety. Then we'll talk a little bit about executive functioning and specifically some strategies for different domains within executive functioning. And then we'll close up by talking some behavior strategies, and we will leave you with a whole bunch of resources to be able to look into these topics a little bit more, and we'll also allow some time at the end for some questions.
Okay, so first starting off, the COVID pandemic changed everything, the world, teaching, life overnight. And these rapid changes created insane chaos and stress, and kind of shifted everyone into this survival mode mentality. And the surveys that have been conducted from the time the pandemic started up until now really show that students primarily need much more emotional support, but even more so than just students, parents, and I'm actually also going to add in teachers need much more emotional support at this moment. There are record rates of childhood depression, childhood trauma, childhood suicide, ideation and risk. And because of that, it's very, very important that we kind of shift our lens right now away from really hitting the academics hard, even though it can be super scary because we haven't been full bore academics for almost 2 years. But functioning of our students so we can prepare them to gain more of that instructional support later on. So kind of going on to some important considerations that we have, that's really important to really understand before we move forward, is that a lot of family systems didn't get better. Even though now we're back in school, even though now things have gone quote unquote back to normal-ish, family systems are not better. There's additional stressors were added, financial, emotional, medical, and children for a really long time lost their safe space. School was an area of consistency and safety for a lot of kids. And when you lose that for such a long period of time, we're going to see a lot of effects of that we're really seeing playing out in the classroom. From what I hear, record levels of behavior issues, record levels of emotional issues, really difficult time getting back into the routine and structure of school, and just overall choosing not to do school or to do like life even, with some of our older kids. And then a lot of the physiological needs were neglected and friendships were really displaced. So if you were a student that really struggled with creating connections and friendships to begin with, they are even more isolated now. Good, Tara.
When Natalie and I were thinking about, with all of these kind of difficulties that she just laid out, and knowing that kids are struggling across the board, how can we kind of identify some highly potent interventions that will hopefully make kind of the biggest difference in the classroom with honestly the lowest amount of effort, knowing that there's so much required from everyone. And again, our kind of emotional availability is stressed to the max. And as we were having that discussion, it kind of became really obvious, and we're excited in how we were able to present these strategies, that if we look at behavior, if we look at executive functioning, if we look at kind of safety and security, they're all interconnected. And you can't just address one and expect really that things get better. It's about looking at all of these different areas of functioning for kids and in the classroom, and kind of adding a little bit, kind of bolstering each of these little areas a little bit so that we're addressing kind of the whole picture for students. And that's how we're going to approach today's training. So you'll notice some overlap here and there. And the point being that when we start to talk about emotional supports, there's also behavior supports. And we start to talk about behavior supports, there's also executive functioning supports. So it's important to kind of see that big picture as things are connected. We're going to start with talking about creating a safe and supportive environment. And this is something that when I talk to teachers, it's not like any teacher would say, yes, I would like to have an unsafe and not supportive classroom. We all seek to and want to have a safe and supportive classroom. However, a lot of times the classroom environment isn't that way for students, especially students that either have some of those outside factors that Natalie was talking about, or that really struggle in learning or struggle in their social engagement. And so we have to make a concerted and kind of very purposeful effort to create some ways of interacting and some strategies in the classroom that are sometimes very explicitly communicating to students that is our job, that in this crazy world and in everything that's going on, to ensure that you do feel safe and welcome and seen in this classroom. And there's high expectations so that we will continue to learn. So what are these supports? One, or I'm going to kind of point to a couple of things. I also want to highlight, Natalie and I are going to lay out quite a few strategies and kind of touch briefly on them. At the very end of our training, we've created some Padlets that have, I mentioned resources earlier, have so much more about everything that we're touching on. And also, please know that you can always reach out to Natalie and I afterwards too, if what was that thing? Or, I want to know more about that, because we know we have an hour here to cover a pretty broad area. So when we're looking at creating a safe and supportive environment, there's a couple of specific areas to look at. We want to create the relationship. Relationship is number one. It, I think, is the biggest kind of can have the biggest effect. And research shows that having a safe and supportive or a kind of unconditional member on a school staff that you really feel connected to is the number one indicator of school success and engagement. So we're really want to focus on that relationship component, and we all do that individually. We all have our own ways of connecting with students, but we want to make sure that we are spending some time there. Time kind of preventatively so that there's not as much stuff going on reactively. And ultimately, we want kids to want to be in the classroom with us. We have to keep that in mind that, you know, learning is hard and sometimes it's boring and sometimes it's hard to understand why. And so we want to make sure that the way that we're interacting with students, the way that we're kind of demonstrating that we care is that like they want to come to our classroom. If they don't want to come to our classroom, maybe we need to do some turning onto ourselves and see like, what can I do that would encourage or kind of draw students into being there? I know that one thing is that one strategy that we read about all the time that I'm continually amazed at the effect that it has is individually greeting a student every day. Stand at that front door, stand there at the beginning of every period, stand there in the morning and make eye contact and some brief, very, you know, meaningful engagement with every student. Takes about, I don't know, 1.5 to 3 minutes at the most. There's some really cool videos out there on YouTube and on Facebook with teachers who are doing all kinds of wonderfully creative things there. But if you're just not sure where to start in terms of relationship, that's a great place to start. And really kids start to look forward to it. We also want to maybe think about starting the day positive. Maybe we don't jump into all of the overwhelming content that we have. We have to get this done and turn in this and that and this. Because that, especially for our kids that are anxious or the kids that are kind of coming from really chaotic home environments, they need some like grounding in the classroom. They need something that's positive and enjoyable, whether that's a song or that's a silly game or that's an open discussion, depending on the age of students you're having. Maybe it's just even doing, you know, a community circle where you're just greeting everyone and kind of checking in on the day. Again, we want kids to want to be there with us from the beginning, and then really focusing on incorporating student interests into our day. How can we really develop character and emphasize like every student has a place, a visual place in the room as well. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these individually, but you know, again, each of these strategies will have a resource for you to look at how do you create that respect and trust. How do you promote a calm classroom? How do we create ultimately an environment where it's not stressful? We really need to acknowledge that like no one likes to be at work when it's stressful. I know a lot of us are at work right now and it's stressful. We can do a lot to help kids not feel stressed at school. And I think that is, you know, we all learn better. We're more accessible. We can try harder. All of those things can occur when we are remaining kind of calm in the classroom. So we talked a little about creating relationship. I just wanted to show some kind of visual images. I talked through some of this already, but we have to think about we're not living in a world anymore where students think that they should or will kind of walk into the classroom and say like, "Ooh, I respect the teacher no matter what. I'm going to sit down, listen, and do what they say." We can pontificate on why that is. However, it's just is. So now we're really looking at more to, can we give respect? Can we show students that we care about them and see them? And then I promise they'll give it back to you. So if you're having a lot of like clashes and kind of defiant behavior or not respectful behavior, this is a really good place to step back and think about how can I show them that I'm giving them respect, and that they don't have to kind of, you know, front against us a little bit, but that this is going to be a collaborative relationship. And as I mentioned earlier, that this kind of relationship is the number one predictor of school success in the future. So we need to ensure that kids feel safe emotionally, so that they don't feel like they're going to be put on the spot and embarrassed. They don't feel like they're going to be, you know, made to feel less than. And so really spending some time and energy in that domain. Hallie mentioned a moment ago, maybe we take on the idea that we prioritize relationship over academics. I know it's so counterintuitive to start, at least. We want to keep that big picture in mind, the big picture being things are crazy. And the big picture being that when we have relationship, you will get more work out of them. They will want to try harder. They will be more willing to take a risk, to make a mistake, to step out and try something that's a little bit scary, or even just to work hard. When we want to work hard, when we respect the people that we're working for, when we know that there's a collaborative relationship. And the bottom line too, when people aren't mentally well, when they're stressed out, when they're upset, they can't learn anyway. So if you decide like, we don't have time and space for this, we're just going to get, to the grind all the way through, you're likely going to have to deal with a lot of issues because stressed kids, stressed minds, stressed people don't learn and work. So just because we're kind of taking this perspective to start, that doesn't mean forever. But maybe we start there and kind of address some of the issues, and then we can increase demands. And that can go up and down. Like if you're noticing in your room, oh, everyone's really stressed today, or maybe we just got put on, a shelter in place again, or who knows what crazy things the world is going to happen to us. Maybe we might reduce demands, focus on relationship, focus on being together so that we can be more ready to push ahead in the future. So big strategy here, kind of number one, not sure how to do this, not sure how to go about, connecting with students, try asking them. Little ones all the way up through our high school students. Hey, what do you need from me? What am I doing that doesn't work for you? It's a really scary question to ask as a teacher, but oof, man, we can get some amazing information back, not only in our teaching, but also in our interaction, that safety. If I was just talking to a student the other day and I said, if someone helping you asks a question, how are you doing? Do you want to do this? They really want to know. And he said, I don't think that's true. I think I'm expected to say that I'm fine, or I'm expected to say I'll do it. And so that is not, he told me he was feeling betrayed in the school setting because an agreement hadn't been followed through on. So we kind of undercut these relationships in ways that we don't even realize. So allowing that open communication with students, maybe make an agreement and a plan with kids that are really struggling. I hear that you're struggling today. How much do you think you can do? What do you think you can do tomorrow? Or let's just check in tomorrow and see. Directly communicate, like, I want you to feel safe and supported here. Just that sentence alone, that's my job. I'm here for that. And then just make sure that you never dismiss what a student's saying. We're open up this respect. And if they say, well, I feel like you don't like me, or you don't listen, or I'm stupid, I'm never going to get it right, don't say like, oh, that's not true. That's very dismissive. Or like, that's not what I do. We want to really concentrate on like, oh, I'm sorry, so sorry you feel that way. I hear how you're feeling. Let's talk about how we can make it better. We're getting out of those like kind of confrontational situations, and we're building trust and rapport. There's an activity called I Wish My Teacher Knew. And it's literally, we just give the assignment, what do you wish I knew? And it's heartbreaking and also really interesting to know what kids will tell us. I wish my teacher knew that I don't have a friend to play with me. I wish my teacher knew that sometimes my reading is not signed because my mom is not around. So these really kind of fundamental things, that can give us a lot of information, not to mention really build trust with students in activities like this. Another thing I want to highlight is to teach coping strategies. We have to directly teach these skills. These are not, go ahead and use your coping strategies or calm down in every classroom, whether it be a specialized one or one with general ed students. We want to focus on teaching them what to do when they're stressed. We all need that. My watch tells me to do it and I ignore it. So we all need practice with this. So we really want to create an environment where when someone's struggling, they know how to stop and think. And now I'm going to talk about this a minute. Provide some modeling. Oh, you guys, I'm feeling really stressed out right now. Can we stop? I'm not sure if this lesson's going to work out. I need to use a strategy. Let's take a deep breath. So that we're modeling it in return, that, it becomes a skill that we can actually use in the moment when we're upset. We want to actively engage them in recognizing what it feels like to be upset, stressed out. Do your ears buzz? Are your cheeks hot? What is going on for you? And then practice daily, multiple times daily, taking a deep breath, practicing counting to 5, whatever it might be. And then those couple of students that really need it, they'll be more likely to use it. One, if it's normalized in the classroom as a strategy that everyone uses. And two, we've practiced. And so we learn when we're calm. We don't learn when we're upset. And when you are incorporating these coping strategies into the classroom, we want to be sure that we avoid accidental consequences. Like, hey, you took some space away to calm down, but you didn't finish that assignment. So now it's homework. Oh, why would I ever use my strategy again? It just gave me a consequence. It's not about the work. Let that assignment go, give it an excuse. They did something good for their mental health. They stayed calm and they took a step towards being able to complete that assignment. And then really label when you can what you want them to do. I see you're feeling frustrated. Maybe you're having a hard time. Let's stop. Let's practice. So again, really, really modeling these strategies. And then creating a visual too. I love having kids create the visuals for themselves, but where that's not possible, something like using the amazing movie Inside Out, which is just so good in terms of both emotional regulation and understanding the cognitive processes. Anyway, but really having a visual, some kind of scheme or strategy. Is it colors? Is it numbers? Is it names of zones, whatever it might be? But how are we teaching kids to identify and kind of quantify what they're feeling and where they're feeling it on some type of scale so that they can recognize where they are and where they need to get back to? So be sure that when you're teaching these coping skills, you want to provide multiple options. Sometimes for older kids, it might just be putting their hood on and putting their head down. For some kids that maybe have a little bit of a bigger response, we might just teach them to walk away. We go to deep breathing, but deep breathing doesn't work for everyone. Maybe they need to actually leave the environment, or maybe they need to think of their favorite space. Maybe they need to listen to music. I love this list here on the right side was up in a classroom very clearly. If anyone needs to use any of these strategies at any time, it's open and available to you, and lots of options. So we can really, again, create that culture where being regulated, being safe, being calm is a priority.
Okay, as Tara mentioned earlier, stop and think is a super, super powerful coping strategy that not only attaches, kind of hits that social emotional coping area, but it also kind of brings in the inhibitory control executive functioning issue that we will talk a little bit more later about, that we see in our kids. Stop and think is a curriculum all on its own, and it is incorporated into other aspects of certain curriculum like Second Step and other SEL curriculum. But essentially, it's the same general idea. We teach our students to stop when something is happening, when they are going to encounter a problem, when they start feeling upset, when they hit a wall of where something is difficult or disappointing. And then we think about what we're going to do. So stop. And then we think what we're going to do. How are we going to do it? What do we need in order to move forward with this? Who can I ask for help and support? And then finally, act. So once we've finally taken a beat, we've thought about what we're going to do, we've thought about our options, then we move forward and act in the safest way possible. We want to make sure that this is practiced not only for things that elicit really big behaviors, but also for things that are minor inconveniences in the classroom, like Tara had mentioned. Oh, I'm really struggling with this with this problem right now. I'm going to take a beat. I'm going to stop. I'm going to think about what my options are and how I can solve this and how I'm going to plan for this. And then once I've come up with my plan of action, we can move forward and address it as we see fit. So it's a really great intervention that can be adapted from, early elementary all the way to high school. That is kind of a double hitter. In our next area, go ahead, thank you, is regulating the environment. So it's really interesting how sometimes we don't realize how the environment maintains some of these, maladaptive behaviors, whether it be behavioral or executive functioning or emotional. So we really want to make sure to identify triggers in the classroom that are causing this challenging behavior. So if you have a student that's very impulsive, obviously sitting them next to a window or to an open door is just going to really amp up that inattentive and possibly impulsive behavior. Additionally, if you are an early education teacher and you have your kids in groups and you have the little bucket in between of all of the things, and your kids are constantly messing with that little bucket, maybe remove it. So really looking around your classroom and seeing what types of things can trigger these behaviors that we might see, and how we can address it that way can really undercut a lot of things before they get going really negatively. The other thing is to establish routines, warnings, transitions. A lot of times students, not only with disabilities, but that are neurotypical or just have anxiety, which literally I feel like every kid has anxiety nowadays. Our anxiety is alleviated when we know what is going to happen, when we know what to expect, and when we can come into the classroom and have that cognitive load taken off of our shoulders, where we're wondering what's going to happen and what are the expectations. It frees up a lot of mind time to focus on learning new things or practicing strategies that we're already taught. And then additionally, reviewing expectations before starting an activity. A lot of times students have issues because they don't know what's expected of them. They don't know where the rules are, they weren't explicitly taught, or the way that it was explicitly taught was not clear enough for them to understand. So then they make missteps, and then it kind of snowballs into behavior or emotional dysregulation. And then we have to address that behavior again, where we could have headed off at the pass with some clear expectations. So the important thing, the most important thing is modeling and practice. For every single one of these strategies, it's opportunities to model and practice. We have to teach them a couple of things. So number one, to identify their feelings. So one of the reasons why students kind of break down emotionally is because they don't know how to communicate our needs. Think about students that are in classrooms with significant needs, or students on the spectrum, or students who have intellectual disabilities. Those behavior issues pop up really intensely because they can't communicate to us what they want. Same thing with emotions. If students have a very narrow emotional vocabulary, they can't really explain to you that I feel jealous, that I feel frustrated, that I feel betrayed, like Tara was talking about. And it can really cause a barrier in helping to overcome those feelings. And we have to model these things. One of my favorites is the mood meter. I'm looking at you, high school and middle school. I get that all the time. This isn't for older high school or middle school kids. That one is. The mood meter is an excellent way to teach students expand their emotional vocabulary, while at the same time teaching them how to tap into their own emotions, both positive and negative, and then also gives you a read on how your students are doing in the classroom. So I would absolutely look into that one. And then also using books and characters in reading material to talk about feelings, to dialogue, what's going on? What do you think they're thinking? How can we solve this problem? Have you ever felt this way before? And it really helps facilitate that emotional inventory. And then finally, practice. Review the things before we go to recess. We practice our problem solving strategies. We come back into recess and we do a debrief of how things went. When we know that we're sending one of our resource students into their woodshop class, that's always a trigger for them. What are we telling them before, and how are we practicing with them? And then how are we debriefing after the fact? So these skills are not just spontaneously acquired. They do not happen solely through kind of environmental osmosis. They have to be explicitly taught, just like we would teach math or reading or writing. And then finally, the most important thing is during an outburst. It's not the time to talk. It's not when we teach them how to do their deep breathing. It's not when we try to reason with them. Think back to a time where you were very upset about your partner, or really upset about someone cutting you off on the freeway, or some really significant disappointment that happened. You are not to be reasoned with in that moment. You need to take a break, and you need to be able to calm yourself down and kind of recoup later after you've sorted your feelings out. And this is a very common misstep that we do with students is we try to engage in the social emotional learning when they're dysregulated, and that will fail every single time. So that's why it's so important to make sure that we teach them beforehand what to do. So in the moment, we can cue them to pick a strategy and then reassure that they know what to do because they've practiced. So now we're going to move on to some self-management and executive strategies. This is my own personal favorite area. We can move on to the next one, Tara. Self-management and executive functioning are a significant area of need for most students, especially now post-pandemic. If you are looking at the SEL lens that's coming up in the self-management area, it looks at impulse control, stress management, discipline, self-motivation, goal setting. And then when we look at executive functioning skills, they all kind of fall into that same domain: inhibition, shifting, emotional control, initiation, working memory. So if you are not fully aware what executive functioning skills are or how they impact the classroom, which is literally in every way, math, reading, writing, especially behavior, social skills. Executive functioning is a big heavy hitter. We will be able Here we go.
You just want to mute. There you go.
Okay, there we go. All right. So when we're looking at executive functioning, one important thing to note is that when we are stressed, our ability to cope and call on our executive functioning skills completely deteriorates. So before, if we were able to be calm, cool, collected cucumbers, or we're able to plan, or we're able to inhibit our impulses or see how our behavior impacts others, when we're stressed, that goes out the window and our ability to call on those skills is depressed. I really like to liken it to the weak organ theory, which says that in any illness, the organs that are weakest to start with are the first to go and are susceptible to further breakdown when something happens, when there is an issue. So problems are essentially system overloads, and they tax weak skills already to begin with. So if you, for example, if you struggle with flexibility, that's my own personal executive functioning weakness. When I am stressed out, my ability to be flexible and to kind of go with the flow, which is already not great, is even more impaired, and I dig in and it's even harder for me to move forward. So because of this, we have to really be aware and watch and put systems in place to reduce stress or cue into coping when we see those systems decline, so we can minimize the fallout. So some common executive functioning concerns that we hear all the time is my student has poor impulse control. They are like calling out, they're trying to grab their peers, they're running away, they're saying crazy things. That's poor impulse control, right? It's not that they're defiant or they're disruptive, is they have a deficit in their neurocognitive skill of inhibition. Another one is procrastination. I can't get students to start on anything. I can't get them to do their work. They leave everything to the last minute. I give them instructions and they just sit there like a deer in the headlights. We get that one a lot. This one is a big one now after the pandemic or during the pandemic, is students being unmotivated. And we hear that a lot, and that can be very difficult to start to attack, because what do you do when people feel unmotivated? And then, the organization, there's stuff everywhere, their thoughts aren't organized, their materials aren't organized, the room is a mess, my classroom is a mess. So these are kind of the three biggest concerns. And the ones that we're going to look at today, we talked about impulse control a little bit before the stop and think. The ones we're going to focus on today are going to be procrastination and motivation. Procrastination is so hard. The fundamental weakness, executive functioning weakness, associated with procrastination is in difficulties with initiation. So essentially, you don't know where to start, you feel overwhelmed, so you end up doing nothing, or you end up putting things off. This is a very, very crucial thing to kind of switch your thinking about, to view your students not as people that don't want to do something or putting things off to the last minute, but rather they're so overwhelmed that they just don't know where to go from here. This is also one of the hardest skills to get good at, and it's one of the later skills to develop. So having the expectation that your fifth grader or even your sixth grader should be good at getting up and going on their own is not realistic, because it does not develop until start to develop until probably 12 to 13, and it doesn't fully develop until after they're 25. And even then, I know some of you out there have a whole list of things that they haven't got done yet and are putting off. So procrastination impacts everybody. So a couple of things. What we do is we show them how to follow directions. One of the great ways to start with initiation is to pair it. So it's really like a Pavlov's dog situation where we have them start something and then we reinforce it immediately. So we want to be specific. I follow directions, I finish my work, and then the second they do it, you reinforce it, right? Or beforehand, you tell them, I need you to follow your direction, or I need you to finish your work. And then give them that really, really clear structure of what that looks like. That way you can eliminate any of like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and so I freeze. So these are two examples of how we can get started on pairing that what am I doing with what should I be doing with consistent reinforcement. Another kind of example, this is an evaluation. This one can be used for older students, and this one looks at the time of day or what they're doing and how they view their behavior, and then how that behavior is viewed by the teacher. And you essentially get points for being accurate. So not necessarily for doing that behavior, but for viewing your behavior appropriately. So once students can see what it is that they're doing, then they can start building on those skills afterwards to get up and go. And then finally, this is going to be in the Padlet that we will be sending, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in there for now so you can peruse as we talk. But specifically to combat initiation with older students, we want to make sure that they have a specific plan with the start time. So we essentially ask them the question, what do you have to do? When are you going to do it? And then possibly even where will you do it? And have them start. So for example, during my resource time or my study skills time, I am going to do I'm going to do 10 math problems, and then I'm going to get started on my writing thesis. And then when are you going to do it? I'm going to do it after I say hi to my friends. And then you set the timer, or after they say hi to their friends, then you say, hey, all right, it's time to get to work. And then they start, and then you reinforce. Now, this is very difficult. It takes a lot of repetition, and you're going to be like, girl, I cannot possibly reinforce these students after every single, time that they have to get started. But unfortunately, for kids who have very, very depressed initiation skills, that's what you have to do in order to create that mind behavior connection. And you can use this with prompts, timers, visuals, and then just keep repeating it over and over and over again until it gets a little bit more solid, and then you can start pulling back.
And Natalie, if I can, if a student is able, verbal praise might be enough. So it might just be like, I'm teaching. Oh man, you got started. Great job. So it doesn't have to be something where you stop instruction for everyone. And if a student can handle giving them self-reinforcement, you could even like give them a sign or like a poll or something that lets them know, oh, I should circle that I did it, or kind of indicate. So it can be integrated depending on, again, the level of your student with, your teaching.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you. When we're troubleshooting, we want to start with easy tasks first. We're not going to start trying to build initiation skills with, their greatest area of need, because you're just going to set everyone up for failure. So we want to also have them identify what's getting in the way of getting things done. Is it because it's too hard? Is it because it's too boring? Is it because there's something else I want to do instead? So it really starts to create that internal dialogue of, why am I not engaging in this process right now? And then additionally, you have a conversation with them about what they don't procrastinate about or with, and why is it that they are able to, get their life together with this sort of thing and not with another. And then another great way of doing it is delaying a preferred activity until they've at least started or finished the not so great task. So these, I went super quick on all of those, but there are very, very detailed step-by-step instructions on the Executive Functioning Padlet on how to build initiation skills. And then if we go to the next slide, there's a whole worksheet about having that conversation of what's getting in the way, and then giving them different strategies to kind of match that barrier. So if they don't understand the assignment, these are all of the things that you can do to kind of combat that obstacle and get over the initiation hump. So what happens if, like, my kid has just stopped working? Like, it's, February and they have not done work since September 1st. So one way that you could address this is have a clean slate policy. It's not realistic to think that they're going to be able to make up all of the work that they missed, and it's just going to maintain that feeling of overwhelm and I don't know where to start. So clean slate it up, and then be able to find just some of the key pieces of work that are manageable so you can get them back into the process. Really having a conversation with them about what they think they can manage and what's realistic for them for the rest of the year is going to be super important. And some people might be like, I'm not going to have conversations like this with our students. And to that I say, what's better, having 1 or 2 assignments put in or having 0 assignments put in? And then the ability to negotiate and have that conversation, number 1, is going to teach them self-advocacy. Number 2, it's going to teach them self-monitoring, so to be able to tap into what they can do or what they can't do. And number 3, it's going to help build that relationship because you care and you listen. And then, explaining to everyone why it is that you're taking this approach, because the primary goal is to start building initiation skills. And that strategy or that skill is going to take them very, very far into adulthood, because you have to get started on everything, right? You have to get started on washing your dishes. You have to get started on doing your laundry, and building that skill early on is going to be very important. Additionally, with this, I really like, because I take this approach as well, starting on something that is super duper easy. It's a great way to get the ball rolling on your initiation. So for example, if I feel like I have very long to-do list, I just can't for the day, I'm like, this is not going to happen. I will add really silly things like brush teeth, make coffee, because it makes me feel successful and it helps keep the ball rolling a bit. So moving on to the next one is when our students are unmotivated. So what we need to know about this is, again, this is a skill that develops later. It's very important for us to be familiar with the developmental progression of executive functioning skills so we understand what are appropriate expectations to have of our students. So it is a difficult skill to learn because it requires all of the executive skills combined. And then what we want to make sure is a way to address this is to teach goal setting, specifically around what is important to students. And then really question ourselves, is motivation the real issue? Because a lack of motivation can be a mask for depression, can be a mask for family issues, it can be a mask for difficulties with connecting with your teacher. So really hunkering down on trying to figure out what exactly is the issue. and how we can help. I love personal best goal setting. This is such an important skill, and it really helps overcome the motivation hump. So young children, we can relate it to or teach them by addressing something that they're interested in, like sports or a hobby that they want to get better at. And then for older children, we can attach it to more tangible things, like they want to get their driver's license or they want to get a part-time job. So when they have something that's very reinforcing and meaningful for them that they want to get better at or they want to attain, they're more likely to be more motivated. We want to make sure that the goals are focused and short term and attainable. So what this means is, for example, we see that a lot with behavior students, and I'm sure Tara will talk about this later, is they have to have a whole good day in order for them to earn a reward. And if you fall apart at 10 o'clock, your whole day shot, we're not even going to bother trying anymore. That goal is too lofty, and our students are not being set up for success. So we want to make sure that our goals are in that sweet spot of attainable. And so when we look at how to help, we teach students how to develop a plan. We have them think about how am I going to achieve my goal? What materials or help am I going to need? And then afterwards, when they attempt to, go after this goal, we ask them, what went right? What went wrong? What do I need additional help with, or what do I need to adjust? And then again, normalizing that we can adjust these goals if they're too lofty. There is no shame in the modification game. If something is too difficult and we just didn't meet it, just bring that goal down just a little bit to make sure that we can. And then after we hit that target for a while, then we can bump it back up again. So again, there is a very detailed system of how to go about this personal best process with students. It's in the Padlet, but basically it follows this simple structure of, you have them choose a goal. They choose a goal, not you. It is not your goal. It is their goal, what they want to work on. So process goal is being able to get through the steps of something. So for example, like they want to work for a certain amount of time on a particular task. That's a process goal. An outcome goal is the result of a process. So I want to get at least an 80% on my next quiz, right? That would be outcome. So you have to figure out which type of goal that they want to try to go for. We want to make sure it's developmentally appropriate for the student. We want to make sure that it's specific, measurable. This sounds a little familiar for my special ed people, hopefully. Measurable. Decide the time frame in which we want to achieve it. Are we going to work on this for a week? Are we going to work on this for a couple of days, for a month? And then write out what steps are going to be involved in reaching this goal. And then for the next one, thank you, record as we go through, teach them how to ask for help. And then if the personal best goal was not achieved, reflect on why. And if it was achieved, how are we going to bump it up next time? And then closely monitor students' progress throughout. And I highly recommend getting your students to monitor their own progress. Number one, it's easier for you. Number two, it really has them take ownership of it. And again, it starts to connect that self-monitoring and being able to think about their thinking and their behavior. Going on to that, thank you. So here are some examples. One is a SMART goal planner, and the other one is just more written out. So making sure that they follow the same process that special education teachers do in order to create their own IEP goals. And then you can even attach it to their IEP goal so they know this is what they're working on and why, and what the end result is going to be. So monitoring can be super simple. It can be as easy as writing the date, the minutes worked, and how did it go? Or I really, really like the word list where they color in, how many things that they know, or how long they were able to work for, or, their scores on certain tests. Like, I think that visual is super important in making sure that they continue to be motivated to work towards their goal, because they can see actual progress. Because sometimes it's really, really hard to make sure that to feel like you're on track. There we go.
Sorry, guys, I'm handling two screens here. So Natalie just threw, again, like so many amazing strategies that also overlap really nicely with behavior strategies. But the thing that I really like about going through that whole kind of discussion first is that we are not maybe viewing all of the behavior through, Natalie mentioned, like just being defiant or like choosing not to do work, but are there some specific issues that are happening that we can give some targeted support to? So like step one, think about all of that. I think we look over those issues and assume that it's just like a motivational issue or a don't want to issue. And it may actually be a can't because of one of those things that Natalie was discussing. So in terms of pure as if they were a thing, but we're looking at more at behavior strategies. There are a lot of recommendations that should be sort of provided within every classroom in a class-wide behavior support. So we call this PBIS. We call this kind of tier 1 in a multi-tiered system. We call it lots of things. And listed here are the 8 or 9 tier 1 strategies that should be hopefully in place in every single classroom, pre-K all the way up through transition classrooms, in college classrooms as well, lots of every classroom. We don't have time to go through each and every one of these strategies, but we do have a Padlet that has a column for each strategy that I would highly encourage you. If you aren't aware of what these are, there's a self-assessment on the Padlet that lists these out, gives some examples, allows you to kind of rate yourself in the classroom to see if any of these are in place and what to do or where to start. And I would say it can be overwhelming. Again, we're throwing lots of strategies at you, and now we're saying all these things should or must happen in every classroom. We know the real life situation, right? So as we're talking about these strategies, specifically about behavior strategies, choose one that you think one you could do easily, like feels good to you, feels like a good fit with how you're teaching, and try to get in there. And try that one and see if you can make some change with creating 5 classroom rules that are posted. And just like students, that then gives us some motivation and some positive feedback and like path of least resistance, like Natalie was talking about, and allows us to kind of get these strategies in place one by one. Jim, I see your comment about this, the link for the Padlet in the chat. I'm hoping Natalie can throw that in there. If not, I will do it in just a moment. The Padlet for the executive functioning should be just above the Padlet. Thank you, Natalie. The next strategy, or what I really want to highlight for you, if I were to say, where do I start? Where do I start with behavior? There are, start with praise. I know we talked about relationship earlier. This goes hand in hand. It seems so very simple. I've done a lot of research on this recently, and we're not doing it in the classrooms. I don't know why. It is so kind of not a regular part of much of the culture in the classrooms. And this doesn't mean that classrooms are negative. I would say that they're just neutral a lot of the time. There's a lot of kind of discussion going on. The teachers definitely teaching strategies, but we want to make concerted and specific effort to praise what students are doing correctly. Give it more attention than you give to students who are doing things that you don't want. Really quick story, when I first started teaching, I had a classroom that I was taking over of for boys and students who had emotional behavior disorders. And the language that they used on my first couple of days of teaching was really, really inappropriate. Lots of cursing, swearing, lots of different slurs going on, really concerning, something that as a teacher you have to deal with. And I feel so lucky that I had a behavior specialist at the time who, one, I wanted him to come up and help me. And 2, I said, I'm going to get fired. What do I do? There's so much swearing, help me. He gave me a big bag of like one single bite candies. What are those fun size candies? And he said, for the next week or 2, your goal is to get rid of all this candy. And while you're getting rid of it, tell the kids what they're doing correctly. When they're not using swearing, when they're talking respectfully, when they're asking appropriate questions, when they're talking to each other respectfully, give it away. don't say anything about the swearing and the negative behavior for 2 weeks, and then we'll check in. I thought it was crazy. It felt very counterintuitive to me as a brand new teacher. And I'm telling you, after 2 weeks, we did not have swearing anymore. It was not an issue in the room. But what we were really doing was finding every opportunity to praise students, which we needed as the teaching staff to really like exercise that muscle to stop and praise and really pay attention to that element. The bottom line is just there's ratios out there and they say this many praise to that many, feedback or redirection. The goal is just to say more positive things, like really try that. Maybe you put a handful of paper clips in a pocket and your goal is to move them over to the other pocket throughout the day or throughout the period for the positive things you say. So this is actually a goal for us as educators, that we change our behavior that then impacts and has kind of a balancing effect on student behavior. Challenge yourself and see how you feel at the end of the day. You'll smile more. Kids will smile more, and also they'll start to notice too that you're really paying attention to these things. And it doesn't have to be huge positive things that are changing the world. It can be very small things. Hey, thanks for looking at me. Wow, great job picking up your pencil. I really like, how you raise your hand, or look at you, you started working. That's fantastic. And just kind of see how that impacts the room. There's a lot of evidence to show it is really an extremely effective strategy that doesn't require a whole bunch of systems being created. Speaking of systems, there is a recommendation that a class-wide reinforcement system be used. And this is an opportunity for all students in every classroom to earn or to gain access to motivating, fun activities, or time in the classroom for doing what we want them to do. We really think about, none of us go to work without getting paid. And while maybe we're super passionate about our jobs and we have a lot of motivation, hopefully, to complete our work, we are earning a reward, a reinforcement. We're getting paid for it. And so I think it's really important that we think about students in the same way. This is their job. It's hard. And we need to increase and give them some motivation and just some feel good, feedback that they're doing what we want them to do. And that's the bottom line that we need to think about. Reinforcement is motivation. And there is no research to show that giving external motivation or providing praise and different reinforcement diminishes or takes away from internal motivation. It can actually build it. Internal motivation is also a skill that's pretty hard and usually develops later in life rather than very young students. And it's hard to be motivated if school is hard for you, or if your life is really out of control, or if it seems like a lot of things in the world are just a little bit more important than that math assignment. So we're helping create some more motivation to do those tasks. We're going to try to really, increase the behaviors we want to see. You want to see new learning. You want to see trying hard things. You want to see, engaging in appropriate behavior. So we're going to give some direct feedback for that, whether it be that all the kids have a little star chart on their desk, that they give themselves a dot or a circle or a check on. When you say, like, give yourself a check, in my classroom it was give yourself a point, give yourself a point. That's all we had to say, and they knew how to give themselves points. For little ones, I also used a stamp pen where they had a little card on their desk, and we'd go around and everyone had a little stamp pen that we could give those points. So there's lots of different ways. Older students, points, checks, check-ins, whatever it might be. But we really want to make sure that we're clear about the fact that we are providing reinforcement for very specific purposes, and that is the rules that we've created in the learning environment. So the recommendation is 3 to 5 rules. No more. If we give more, then we can't remember them. And then we want them to be prominently posted in the classroom, so taking up some good, valuable wall space. And then we're going to review them every day. We're going to review them as often as we need to kind of check back to what we're working on. The most common are be respectful, be responsible, be safe. I'm seeing be engaged added sometimes to rules, but then we need to show them, what does that mean? We're going to teach. What does it look like and what does it sound like? I love these posters that were in a classroom where it literally says, what does it look like? So the behaviors that you want to see, and what are the things that they're saying or doing. So we're operationalizing, we're defining what it is that we want to see. And that's why our rules, if you can't define your rules, then you have a problem. So you really want to think about, are my rules clear enough so that I can really kind of, there's a differentiation between when they're doing them and when they're not. And then when a student is doing something you don't want them to do, rather than saying, stop, don't, why are you, no more, I said, maybe we say, oh, remember our class role is to be responsible. Is that being responsible right now? And then you're teaching in the moment as well, and you're giving them an opportunity to change their behavior. And of course, we're pointing out to students who are being engaged, thank you for being responsible. That's a great, oh, look at you did that. That's a responsible behavior. You turn in your homework, that's responsible. So we're really teaching as we go. There's a lot of different ways to access class-wide reinforcement. This little kind of plastic organizer that one class used, there were tickets of coupons that kids you earned. These were all things that were available in the classroom. Picking the song, getting to wear a funny hat, having a lunch with the teacher, taking off your shoes, bringing in a stuffed animal, show and tell. Again, we can really be creative and also provide options and selections for students. You can grow those up quite a bit for older kids, like choosing the music in class, choosing where you sit, choosing, how much of a worksheet to do. You can really be creative with that. And then the visual on the right there is Class Dojo, which is another, kind of online system to use for positive praise. I would highly encourage you. There is like a takeaway point function on Class Dojo. Let's not use that because it's very natural for us to tend towards the side of taking away or losing. And we want to focus on getting or gaining. And I see that there's some comments about the Padlets coming up as not there, which is never happened before.
The executive functioning one is working. I just clicked on that one and I was able to pop it up. The behavior one for some reason is not. And I've like re-added it. So
let me just try. Thank you for the feedback. Let me jump over and see if it makes any difference for me. I don't know why it would. How about that one? Does that work?
That one works for me.
Cool. None are working for you. I'm not sure because we've never had that issue before. Let me just go ahead and I'm gonna keep going and know that we hear you. We're working on it. Yeah, troubleshooting. That's never been an issue for us before. So just kind of to wrap that all up here, and literally we're at the end here, but the big idea being that we want to recognize through the pandemic, but also just in general, that school's stressful, kids are stressed, things are hard, work is hard. And so we want to and need to create positivity, and we need to model positivity as adults around students. We need to have a classroom, like going way back to the beginning, we need to have a classroom where kids want to be. And so whether that's through the warmth in your relationship, or that's through your super silly, cool praise and reinforcement that you provide, or whatever is your innate personality, we have to incorporate this into our classroom. We need school to be somewhere that kids want to be. And it is, Natalie and I both believe deeply, it's our job as educators to find that environment, find that strategy, find that interaction that does want kids to be there, so that you can teach them all the great things that you want to teach them. So we hope that our strategies today were helpful. We are hoping that we can figure out this really odd snafu with the Padlet. I will go and grab them again. We also have a mental health Padlet that I wanted to be sure to put out there in terms of the safe and supportive strategies. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm hoping, John, do we have a list of participant emails so that if we are able to problem solve this, we can send out these links?
Yes.
Okay, so we will be sure to do that, and try to figure out what's going on with our links. But there they are in the Padlet. There are 3: one for executive functioning, one for behavior, and one for mental health. All right, behavior, and there's a lot of.
Oh, Kara, send yours again to everyone. It just popped up to host and panelists.
Okay.
Executive functioning Padlet works. Yay.
There's mental health.
I think that was it. We were just trying to keep the goods to ourselves.
That's really embarrassing if that's what it is.
So
okay.
Embarrassing.
Okay, there they are. They're there for you.
Zoom.
Use them, share them, now that you have them. Yay. Okay. And we have a couple of moments here for questions if anyone has any.
I know we went through all of that super quickly, and literally each and every one of those domains could be not only like a 2-hour training in itself, but like a full semester. So it's a lot of it. We're just like scratching the surface. For you.
Hopefully they were like easily to grab strategies that don't require a complete overhaul. So again, like of all those things that we went over today, if something really spoke to you, write it down on a Post-it. Just like say, I'm going to try that one strategy and see what happens there. And then if it feels good and you're motivated, come back and grab another one from the information. Otherwise it goes in the like, oh, I should do that pile that we all have. Mine's like right there. So grab one little piece that you really kind of spoke to you and try that. And if it worked, email us and we can give you some positive reinforcement because we would love to hear that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you for your time. Y'all are quiet. So this also, I believe, will be posted on the CEC website at some point if you would like to have other watch it again or recommend it for other people as well.
Oh, cool.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your, what day of the week is it? Tuesday? The rest of your week.
Thanks, Natalie and Tara.
Thank you. Thanks, John, so much. It was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stop the recording and end the meeting. Thanks.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.